Welcome to Staying Connected, a podcast where I talk to people about their stories with VEDS, Marfan, Loeys Dietz, and related vascular and aortic connective tissue conditions. The views, information, and opinions in this podcast are those of the individuals involved, and the information presented does not constitute medical or other professional advice or services. Welcome back. Today we're going to talk to Carmen David, who is going to share her experience with an aortic dissection, which she had after the delivery of her second daughter. She's going to share her experiences recovering from that physically and emotionally, how she handled the information of having 2 VUSs, or variants of unknown significance, and what she's been doing since her dissection to raise funds for research and awareness. Quick note, in this episode, Carmen will share details of her aortic dissection, and she'll talk about the depression she experienced post-dissection. Please listen with care. Before we jump into the interview, if you like this podcast and you want to support our community in our efforts to raise awareness through this show, you can buy merch in my Printify pop-up store, make a one-time donation, or support the show by joining my Patreon. This show wouldn't be possible without the continued support of my Patreon subscribers and donors, so if you've already been supporting the show, thank you. Check out the episode show notes for links to ways to support the show. Let's get into the interview with Carmen. Hey, Carmen, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast to talk about your story with a variant of unknown significance, or VUS, and aortic dissection. Do you want to introduce yourself to people who don't know you already?
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks for having me first, because I'm really glad to be sharing the story, because I think anybody sharing is good awareness all the way around. So, but my name is Carmen David. I am an aortic dissection survivor. I had an aortic dissection 22 hours after I delivered my second daughter. And that isn't all that defines me. I mean, I am a mom, and I say I'm athletic. I used to be more athletic than I am now, but I'm very active. And so that's something that keeps me pretty happy as well. So, and my dog.
Yeah. So what year was your aortic dissection?
I had my aortic dissection in May of 2015.
Okay. And did you have aortic dissection or anything in your family?
I did not. There was no family history, no outward criteria that they, or characteristics that they would have even guessed, I guess, that I would have this happen to me.
Yeah.
So it was very out of the blue, out of the blue. Yeah.
So then so up through your first pregnancy and delivery and second delivery, like no clue.
No clue. Yeah. No clue. I mean, in very easy pregnancies, both very easy deliveries. I mean, in fact, the OB nurse was the same one that delivered my first daughter. And I remember her specifically saying, do you know how many women have to push for, excess a number of hours? And here you are, like 1-2 pushes and like the babies are here. So, I mean, very easy, no issues during pregnancy, but then 22 hours afterward, pain just hit me, and I knew something was really wrong, but I did not know what was happening.
Yeah. What did that pain feel like for people who are like at risk of aortic dissection, afraid of it, and don't know what it feels like?
It was very, they say it's an acute pain. I mean, it was very quick onset, acute pain, but it started basically like the base of my neck, but it went all the way down my spine and across my whole stomach and into my chest. Like I felt like an arrow coming through my chest. Like I just felt like this intense pain all over. And I didn't know, I'd never had anything happen like that before. So I didn't know what it was, but I clearly knew something was not right. And trying to explain that to them, I just said, I feel like I'm having a heart attack or something. And the doctor that had come in to see me said, well, I think you're a little young for that. And just, it kind of felt like it was being blown off, but they were going to do the chest x-ray and a EKG. but they just didn't seem in a hurry, but the pain was, very all of a sudden, but it took my breath away. I mean, I was actually nursing my daughter at the time, and it just hit me so suddenly, like I said, with my chest pain, that I felt like I couldn't really breathe either. And so I just kind of gasped, like all of a sudden I'm just like, I just couldn't, it's like I couldn't breathe.
Yeah.
And, hitting the button to get the nurse and said, I need somebody to come in here now. And, of course they're like, I'll be right there. And, I can understand that they've got a lot of patience, but I immediately, after like hanging up that first call, that button call, like 2 seconds later, I hit it again. And I said, no, I need you to get in here right now and get my OB. Something is really wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And they did. They came in quickly.
Yeah. So I think an EKG and an X-ray don't rule out aortic dissection, right?
Correct. And I've learned a lot about that stuff since having this happen to me. But they can come out clean because it's not necessarily your heart. I know a lot of times people will have open heart surgery because they have an ascending aortic aneurysm or a dissection that's in the ascending part, which is closer to the heart, and that's how they repair it. But mine was on the descending, just at the arch and all the way down. So nothing was wrong with my heart. And so, those came out clean. And so by the time they got me to a CT scan, it was like 3 hours later.
Mm.
I don't know what the delay was in getting me a CT scan after those 2 initial tests were clean, but then they came running after, like, as soon as I was back from the CT, the radiologist alerted everybody, and then it was like move after that.
So did you go through surgery to have that repaired while you were in the hospital?
I did, but it was very delayed because, again, nobody really knew what to do. I mean, with pregnancy, I think there's so many different pains that can happen. But at the same time, I did feel a bit, like I said, blown off about it because, I was 33 at the time, young, active person generally as outside of pregnancy. And, you wouldn't have thought these things. So when I'm telling them chest pain, back pain, stomach pain, obviously that's migratory pain, which I came to learn later was like a classic symptom for an aortic dissection. Acute and migratory pain like that can be it. So I'm like, I'm telling them this, but it's like nobody was catching it or hearing it, and but the CT scan is a definitive diagnosis. And so by the time they got that, they still just didn't know what to do. And so then they finally transferred me to the first hospital that basically said that they would take me. But they were on the phone for a while, and I vaguely remember hearing like the no's of like, we can't take her, we can't take her. And I don't know if you've watched Grey's Anatomy, but there's an episode where Derek is on a gurney and he needs a head CT. And he can't speak, but the 2 doctors over him are discussing, no, he doesn't need a CT. Yes, he does need a CT. And in my brain, when I'm hearing all the no's about taking me to some hospital, I'm thinking to myself, I'm Derek. I'm going to die because these people don't know what to do, how to fix me, and by the time I got to the second hospital, they kind of sat on me for 24 hours almost until my body at that point was really shutting down. I mean, I couldn't control my bodily functions anymore. I couldn't speak even after a little bit of the first hospital. And, I don't really remember anything from the second hospital until finally they transferred me again because of my husband and my sister advocating to like, get me out of there. She needs care. Ambulance me to the third hospital. Mind you, this is in Dallas, Fort Worth. This is a big metroplex. You would think that somebody in 3 different, all these hospitals would know what to do. And by the time they got me there, they said, yes, she does need this surgery, or she will die. But now that there's such a delay in care, which was like 33 hours or something, we can't guarantee she's going to come out of the OR. But they immediately put me in there and placed stents in my aorta through endovascular repair.
Yeah. Did the surgery go smoothly once they did?
They did. Well, initially, I mean, it worked, but to stabilize certain parts, but I guess I was still complaining of abdominal pain. And so they went in and did a second surgery, almost just I don't even know how close together, but very back to back, and deployed more stents to get me out of pain. So I had actually, it was called an aortic dissection complicated type B, because it did affect my organs. And my right leg was not getting any blood flow. So usually type B wouldn't go straight into emergency surgery like that. But because it was affecting everything else, it did. But once they placed the additional stents, then I was stabilized. But I did stay in the SICU for 11 days. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's like right after, like, that's the time that you're like bonding with your baby. We're supposed to be, right?
Yes. And that was incredibly difficult because I didn't understand what was happening at all, and then once, even at that moment in the hospital, I did not understand the gravity of what just happened either. But not being able to hold her or do any skin to skin. I couldn't breastfeed because of the medications they put me on. I tried. My sister and my best friend were helping me pump and dump basically, because they didn't know for sure from the pediatrician yet. And then we got word that she was like, no, I'm not comfortable with the amount of medications they have you on. And so, I just kind of thought, how am I going to bond with her? Is she going to know me? Because my mother-in-law and my mother were the ones taking care of her, which was wonderful. I mean, my gosh, to a grandma to take on a newborn baby all of a sudden, but I just felt like, is she not going to know me? So it was very traumatizing. And I didn't even hold her, which wasn't even really holding her. Craig was kind of holding her in front of me when I finally got to see her 8 days after I was in the SICU, because I literally didn't eat, get up, do anything for 8 days. It was so bad, which is not your typical type B case, but it was very severe for me. And TVAR, the endovascular repair, although it worked, it was not a cakewalk for me as it is for many other people.
Yeah. So you spent 11 days in the SICU, and then, like, at what point how long did you spend in the hospital overall?
I think it was just within the next day. I mean, I think the 11 days was like one of those, might have been step down and then like an additional day.
Yeah.
So getting home, that many days later, I almost didn't want to leave because I was so scared. I mean, I did, but I didn't.
Yeah.
Familiar
with that feeling.
Yeah, I usually say about 11 days is what it was to be in there total.
And when did did you start questioning why this happened, or did they start questioning why this happened to you? Like, when did these conversations start about genetic testing and like figuring all of this out?
I don't know. I don't remember exactly when it happened because I was in such a fog. I mean, not just because of the delivery but the trauma, and then like so much going on that I didn't understand. And they were sending me, I mean, even after I got home, I had like severe headaches. So I was going back to the ER very frequently all the time. But it was that hospital that sent me to the genetic counselor within that hospital system. I don't recall ever asking for that because I didn't know. And they didn't really explain anything about it. Like I literally went home not knowing anything about aortic dissection. I went home and Googled, to be honest, months later. My husband had Googled it, I'm sure, trying to figure out what was happening at the moment, but I didn't really process things till a good 6 months later. But by that time, they did the genetic testing, and I still didn't really understand very much other than they're looking for the reason.
Right.
But yeah, they didn't really say a whole lot. And so I kind of was just left to my own time to be able to process and then be able to learn it on my own via the internet, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, it is. It's such a scary place to learn that
Mm-hmm.
kind of information.
Oh, yeah.
How did you get through that period of time, like from getting home to from the hospital and like the emotional recovery of those like few months of after aortic dissection and surgery?
Oh, man. It was honestly probably more like 2 years. It felt like forever. And it's just going to all like come back to me now. It was incredibly difficult. But like I said, I had my incredible support system around me. My family lives here near me. Craig's family lives around the Houston area, so they were able to drive up and be here. And my mother-in-law stayed here for 5 weeks, helping me with the baby because I literally slept the whole time. And I know that that was just my body recovering from pregnancy and the delivery and the trauma and the surgery and just trying to figure this out. I think I was just completely overwhelmed emotionally and physically. I a lot of prayer. Oh my gosh. I felt like even for months later, if I'd go to church, I felt so much better when I was in church and I'm singing, but I would be breakdown crying. I'm listening to lyrics of, all these hymns that I love. And I just would be like, man, I'm just going to get old. I would, it was so hard. I don't think I could have made it without a circle around me, like my family.
Yeah.
And slowly, very slowly, I was able to, like I said, go online and like learn about it. But that was like 6 months later. And then is when I think more of the emotional stuff really just hit me like a ton of bricks.
Mm-hmm.
And then is when I was just like, God is so good. I'm here. And then I thought to myself, like, I taught a lot of people in a lot of hospitals, a lot of staff about aortic dissection. No matter if my journey was difficult, that helped lead a lot of people to learning that this can still happen to young people, to young women, and who don't have the characteristics even or a family history. And because they were pretty terrified themselves, when this happened. But yeah, getting through it was a long haul. And initially, when it was, my family helping me and then kind of learning about it, I went back to work 6 months later, full time, quote unquote. My boss was incredibly patient and kind and letting me leave when I felt overwhelmed or stressed. But it wasn't really working, and then I was feeling guilty of like, I'm not home with my baby. Cause then I felt like, or babies, both of them, I felt like, you know, I survived this insane thing and now I'm back at work and, I don't feel like we should be rushing through life the way we do. I felt so called to be home with my children. And so I had a really hard time going back to work. But I thought, what, we're going to pay off some of this debt and I'm going to be out of here. But before that like deadline hit, I emotionally just crashed, completely crashed to where I finally told my husband, like, I'm crying in the parking garage again. I literally can't step out of the car. I cannot do this anymore. I don't care if we have to live in a box, sell the house, cars, whatever, do this with me or without me, but I cannot continue the way I'm not functioning emotionally. And physically still was very difficult because I had a lot of leg weakness and sporadic pains, like I said, that led me back to the hospital quite frequently throughout that whole first year. And into the second year, I started feeling a little bit better. And I thought, something's got to change. I need to find myself again. And I thought, I need to go to a gym. I need to try to do this naturally because I don't want to live on medications forever, including antidepressants.
Mm-hmm.
And not that that's horrible. I just wanted to give another option, to do it naturally. And if that doesn't work, okay, then I'll go on whatever you want me to go on. But exercise was what brought me really back to feeling myself.
I relate to that right now. so much. I feel like I'm going through that at the moment. So relatable. So how did the meeting with the geneticist go?
It was very foggy, to be honest. My husband has been my ears since. He went to all my appointments for at least the first 2 years and really most of them since. And it's now been like 9 years. But I don't even really recall anything really of talking to that doctor other than the papers that I received telling me what my variants were. So then is when, again, I just Googled and I learned a lot more about the specific variants via the internet, which
And you
again,
have two VUSs, right?
I do. I have the Col 3A1 and Col 5A2.
And Col 5A2 is Ehlers-Danlos classical?
Classical, yeah. So when I read those and I tried to, again, search things myself, I got really concerned because I thought these are both related to Ehlers-Danlos, one being the severe and the other being one of the lesser subtypes. But still, I thought, how can that not be the reason? Because they actually said it was not pathogenic or disease causing, but it was a variance of unknown significance. And I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe it is, and they just don't know. And like research hasn't told us. And so I learned more about that. But I was very confused about the genetic result. Yeah.
So I know that when we were talking before about this, there were a number of things that you had throughout your life in addition to that aortic dissection that made you look at it and be like, how could I not have one of these, right?
Right.
So
Yeah, I very much looked, and that's what helped was also a part of my being confused about not getting a diagnosis. Of course, nobody wants such a diagnosis, but at the same time, I felt in my mind and heart and body, just like my gut was telling me that I had Ehlers-Danlos or vascular Ehlers-Danlos. And as a kid, I mean, I was always incredibly hypermobile, always bruised easy, still do, and feel that my skin is very thin, like my chest and my arms. I can see all of my veins. But the bruising thing was the biggest. I mean, my whole life, even today, my husband's like, where'd you get that bruise? I'm like, I have no idea. I mean, it's constant. It's like, now it's just not even like a thing unless it's like, the size of a soccer ball on my thigh. It's like I'm just going to have bruises everywhere. I can barely bump something, even my kids or somebody playing with me. You can't hit me in the side of the arm or poke me, because it hurts. And I'm like, please don't do that, because I'll have a bruise in the blink. And so my extremities are very, very tender. And I think I looked up something about what's called the little test that you do where there's 5 different like flexibility things.
Oh yeah, the Baton score, yeah.
Yeah, that. So I can do all these little things with my thumb or, touching the floor, palms down, which was just another thing for hypermobility. But I felt like I had looked at the list online and saw high criteria and low criteria and took that to my physician saying, look, I have a lot of these low criteria and my high criteria would obviously be the dissection happening, and, please clarify. And so I actually took those results from the first hospital and went to Washington State with one of the doctors there that's in the know of all of these connective tissue disorders. And he kind of agreed and said the same thing. It's not really pathogenic, and gave me a lot of stats, but I still was kind of like, just doesn't make sense to me. But I did my due diligence, and I went to like 3 different physicians to say, because for my own peace of mind, I thought, okay, if 2, 3 doctors say all the same thing, then I can be like more at peace with it. And I was, but at the same time, it's always in the back of my mind, like, I think research is going to catch up one day and tell me that it is disease causing, because I get concerned for my kids, and I want to know. So it's difficult to not know.
Yeah. Did you end up testing the kids for the variants that you have?
I did not. And we spoke about this, my husband and I, because, some of the advice is if you've had a dissection, you should test your, immediate siblings and or your children. And then other advice was, well, you don't have a pathogenic variant, so it's not really necessary. And then the third thing was we were really concerned about anxiety because they're small. I mean, now they're 9 and 10, and I'm honestly more concerned for the little one because she is very much like me. And I see her skin very thin. I can see all her veins, and even more so around her body. I mean, even under her eyes.
Mhm.
And people have been like, "Oh, does she have a black eye?" I'm like, "No, please don't mention it because it's just her veins, and she doesn't like people to mention that." And so, and she's incredibly hypermobile. Dislocated her elbow, nursemaid's elbow when she was, I don't know, 2 or 3. And so again, my mind just went there for her. But at the same time, we decided no, just because we didn't want to create any anxiety in her. But we felt like the most important thing was, well, we know the family history, we know what my variants could be an indication of. And so everybody in the family is well aware if she ever has a severe acute pain, that you take her to the ER and this is what you say, which I think is the most important thing in, a given situation.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I don't know if one day we do decide to do it or not. And again, I know the advice is there, but we just kind of felt like we didn't want to create any anxiety and let her be a kid.
Yeah. So earlier you said you started kind of trying to find yourself again, becoming more active, going to the gym. Did you get involved in research? What kind of things did you do when you started kind of finding yourself after this?
So much of all of that. Yeah. And once I really got able to move again, that built so much confidence in, I guess, more of my longevity. At first, I was obviously very fearful and did a lot of bizarre things, thinking I was going to pass very quickly. And to other people, it was bizarre, but to me, it was practical and realistic. But yeah, once I got to, okay, I can walk a 5K. And of course, that started with, 2 houses down, or the driveway, then 2 houses down, then down the block, and then a mile, and really slowly worked my way up. But that helped my confidence to be like, I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm doing a little bit more and I'm okay. And within even before that time frame, I had contacted the John Ritter Foundation and got to go to a symposium that was in Houston. I want to say it was the same year that I started to do more walking and such. And so I immediately got involved in volunteerism through that and connecting with other families that had been through this, or other patients that had connective tissue disorders. I later went to a Marfan Foundation conference, and that was incredible, and the little sessions that they had as well.
Mhm.
And yeah, and that just kind of felt like my mission in life. I felt like, I survived this. I feel like it's like my purpose and like my calling to spread awareness about it and do something to help that community. And it was for various organizations. There's several out there. So it wasn't just John Ritter. The Aortic Hope community has their online webinars and support groups and such. And then online on Facebook, there are several support groups. I started the pregnancy related support group because I didn't know anybody. And I felt like I needed to talk about it. I'm sure there's other people out here. And although it's a very small group, found so many other women that were dealing with this alone. And so, although it's not super active like the main support groups, it's a place where they can connect and ask questions that are a lot more intimate. And, because it's pregnancy related. And later met a gentleman from Chicago who we started the aortic athletes group because you want to encourage people to keep going and live their life, and we don't have to quit, we can adapt and keep moving. So I did get very involved. Like I feel like my life, I live and breathe this. And in that same year, gosh, now that I'm saying it out loud, it all did happen in the same year. So 2017 is when I also started my run event called Runforaortichealth, and started a 5K, 10K running event. At the time, I started it because I wanted to do an awareness video for pregnancy related cases and talk about aortic dissection in general, but then add the piece with pregnancy information or postpartum information. And so the video came out great, but I was trying to fund this video. And so I thought, well, this race can fund this video. If they want like $3,000 to make this video nice for me. And then a hospital here took it on pro bono. And I don't even remember how I got in touch with the guy for media at that hospital. I'm pretty relentless about asking for sponsorships and donations. So I'm sure I was just, asking everybody under the sun. But yeah, they sponsored it. And so then the funds were able to go to the John Ritter Foundation's John Ritter Research Program that first year, which is their genetic research. And so we made, I think that first year was like 15. I want to know the year before when it first happened, like within the year, it was like 15 or 20,000 we raised without the event, just because everybody knew what had happened to me. And then we started the event. It just, now it's been 8 years of the event, and we've raised over $150,000 now that have gone back to aortic research and other initiatives that help the community.
That's incredible.
Yeah. So I know it's a small event, and, but because it's my baby, I started that because I wanted to give back. And I also wanted to myself, find myself again and get back. And in the process of doing that and trying to walk, it really did. And then it just soared from there with trying to get more people to come to the run and participate and volunteer. And then in that process, I was going down my journey of increasing my distance. I went from a 5K, and then I asked about, can I do a 10K, and just moved up from there. But I'm pretty proud of the run because I feel like, and of course, so many people help with that. That wouldn't happen without all the people that are generous sponsors and donors, and all the friends that participate, and runners in the community who are just compassionate to try to come out and help a good cause. I always tell people, there's a lot of good causes out there, but this is one I really would love for you to support, because this is one not very many people know about, and it's important. Rare matters too, and so it may not get as many folks out as a breast cancer run, but I'm like, these people matter, come to this race.
Awesome.
So I'm pretty proud of it. And as long as I have the energy, I will try to keep going.
Yes,
with
amazing.
it.
It's amazing. So it's been a few years, definitely, since it's almost 10 years next year, right?
Yes, it'll be 10 years in May. Yeah, which, has been quite a journey, but I'm like, man, like 10 years. And, I feel pretty grateful though, because of what all I've been able to do in those 10 years. Not just giving back to the community, but being here with my family and raising my kids and building memories with friends and family. And I just cannot thank God enough for keeping me here.
Yeah. So you mentioned earlier that you got involved with the John Ritter Foundation research, and you've funded a lot of money, like you funded money. You funded research too through your run. What other research initiatives have you gotten involved in?
So there's been several things. I feel like, I went back to work and then I quit, and then I feel like I have another job doing all the different projects. So I keep very busy. But yeah, so it started with, again, the John Ritter Research Program and trying to get back to that, and being an ambassador for Aortic Hope and the pregnancy support group, the aortic athlete support group. Mm-hmm. And then, with the race, giving back to specific research for doctors who are working on pregnancy and exercise studies. And that was really important to me because, of course, the pregnancy related was my case. And so I really wanted to fund any study that was going to give us more information as to why this happens to women, whether or not they have a family history, et cetera. And which I did learn a lot about, like hormones and the different things that play into that risk being there. But I really did want to give to that. So we've given to that for several years. And the exercise study, there's a doctor in Houston who is giving all of his effort to try to figure out, how to get people more active again. And that too was really important to me because I felt like I had completely lost myself, and exercise helped me tremendously, but I had to figure it out on my own. And me and actually a guy who's from Australia, who's a friend of mine, a survivor, and nobody was talking about exercise. And so we just exchanged notes kind of back and forth. What are you doing? What does your doctor say? What meds are you on? This and that. And so I think it was in 2021 that I started, or maybe late 2020, started speaking to Dr. Prakash is the doctor who leads the study, and wanted to give funds because that preliminary data that comes from those funds is what can then fund a larger grant, and so I was really excited to be a part of that and helping other people on their journey, because I felt like I don't want anybody to have that difficult a time getting back to themselves, knowing that you can walk, you can swim, maybe you can jog depending on your case, and then more recently with the Aortic Dissection Collaborative, I want to say I first started with them back in 2019 when they very first started this project. And now it has moved on to a trial, the Improve AD clinical trial that's for type B dissection patients, and trying to see what is the best course of action for a type B case, which again is very much around like what happened to me. Granted, I think now I wouldn't be able to be in the study because mine was a complicated type B, but it's trying to figure out if patients should go straight to endovascular repair or wait and do medical management with medicines and low, keeping your blood pressure low and keeping your follow-ups just to watch it. Both of which have worked, are which go-tos, but trying to figure out which is the best one, that way going forward. And without people like myself who have gone through that, we can't move forward. So I'm very much an advocate for research, because without our voice and our case notes and information, we can't move forward and learn and make it better for the next generation.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of different avenues. And even with the continued years of the run, I do want to give back to the Aortic Dissection Collaborative as well and work funds into that arena, because I think there are just so many avenues of helping the aortic community. One of the other ones that I did also was funding the patient guide for aortic dissection that came through Aortic Hope and the Think Aorta campaign, and giving booklets to patients, because I, again, felt like this is something that I didn't have. I didn't have the resource to read something that said, I was going to be fine, or that I was going to probably hit some depression, but that I could exercise. And here are the general medications that people take and the follow up guidelines and things. I thought it was incredibly important to be able to give so that patients can have something versus the internet to guide them on this journey. So I think all of these organizations are doing incredible things, and I just, it's a lot.
Amazing. The stuff that you've done is really, truly amazing and so important. And I just love the emphasis on research and finding yourself again. And I just think it's incredible what you've done, what you continue to do.
Oh, thanks. Sometimes I get a little, weary because you want to do a lot and you want to do more. You want to run funds. I'm like, this year we sent we were able to match it since it's our baby. Our family does this, but we sent $25,000, and I'm thinking, gosh, I wish I could do $100,000. I wish I could bring in like a $500,000 for a gala. But then it's like reminding yourself, like you're still doing something, And so I always wish I could do more. It's just sometimes energy isn't always there either,
Right.
But I'm always
breaks too.
Yeah. And I've had to do that too, which everyone is very supportive of. I had a point this last, I guess it was last early spring, late winter, that I emailed everybody at the collaborative and Aortic Hope and JRF. And I just was like, look, guys, for whatever reason, I'm kind of at a place where I am not doing well emotionally again.
Mm-hmm.
And I need to take a break, maybe like 6 weeks. And everybody was like, yes, take care of you. It's fine. Let us know when you feel up to it. And then was able to email everybody again and get started, and which is incredible because they know your passion. They know you want to help, but that you need to also take care of you. So you're not going to spiral out of control either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So do you have advice for somebody else going through what you did, either after your aortic dissection in that period of time where you were like, physically and then emotionally recovering from that aortic dissection, or, somebody who's trying to get involved in advocacy and fundraising and stuff like you do? Maybe advice for both of those groups of people.
Oh, let's see. So let me start with the advice for a patient first. To just be, patient and kind to yourself in the process, because you don't need to feel rushed in your recovery. Everybody's recovery, I think, is incredibly different. I know some patients that had an aortic repair, prior to a dissection, just a repair, who can up and go, do whatever they did before. And, within 2 months, they're running a marathon again or something. And then other patients like myself, it took like 2 years, to really get acclimated to, I'm going to be okay. I wish it wouldn't have taken me 2 years. So I also would say, make sure that you take care of your mental health. I think that was something that I really put on the back burner because I was going back to work, because I had my 2 kids to take care of and my family and my home and, all the things that come with life. But then you have to really think like, okay, you don't have to rush through everything again, and make sure where your priorities are. And I wish I wouldn't have put that on the back burner. And then by the time I got to it and did some EMDR therapy, which was incredible, by the way, if nobody has tried that before and you're searching to try something, it was incredibly beneficial to me, more than just talk therapy. But not putting that on the back burner, and then you can process what happened faster and not let it take so much away from you. Don't let it steal your joy. Something bad happened, but try your best to move on from it through getting therapy and just surrounding yourself by supportive people who are going to help you on that journey and encourage you versus bring you down about what you should or shouldn't be doing.
Yeah.
sometimes people feel like they're helpful and they're not really, based on what, what they might say. So you do have to kind of take it with a grain of salt. Some people might say, hey, you need to get moving. And you're like, yeah, I know, but I can't. And so you can listen to them, but also, listen to your own self and be kind and patient, because you're the one walking this journey, and finding other folks that are walking your same journey and know exactly what you're going through mentally and physically, who have actually had a dissection, is incredibly important as well.
Yeah.
So these advocate groups like the John Ritter Foundation has the Aorta Advocates, where you can reach out to connect with another who knows what it's like, Yeah, a lot
And
of
I'll get
that.
a
And
link
then
for that from you to put in the episode show notes. So if anybody's listening and is like, okay, I've heard about the aorta advocates, I've heard about the pregnancy related aortic dissection support group, like I've heard about other support groups, anybody looking for those links, I'm going to put a list of those things that were mentioned today in the episode show notes, so that you can find them and find those resources easily. So
yeah, that would be awesome. Yeah, thank
yeah.
you for doing that for everybody. Yeah, and the other one you said, for anybody who's wanting to get started on giving back to the aortic community or being more involved in research. I mean, I think that if you're called to do that, then do it. Don't wait. There are several organizations, as mentioned, that one can be involved with, and either give back monetarily, voluntarily, and anything that somebody does, I always commend, because sometimes I think people think, oh, well, I can't do what she does or he does, and I'm like, I don't care if you gather 15, 20 people and you're trying to spread the message. That's amazing. If you're online talking about it or sharing posts or whatever, you're still doing something, so don't feel that you're less than.
Yeah.
But yeah, getting involved in the research, I'm a huge advocate for anybody who's either trying to influence others to be involved, or is doing an event, or is able to gather money to give back to it, because I, again, think it's incredibly important that we have folks do all of those things, because otherwise we're not going to have any further information to help anybody else, and even like right now, the exercise study done by Dr. Prakash is helping, and the aortic athletes group is helping so many people feel confident again and feel alive again, that they can do something, even if they're just walking around the neighborhood or they're running a marathon or doing whatever they're doing. There's all different levels of activity and research like that that's saying, hey, we watched you for a certain period and your blood pressure and what you were doing exercise wise, and you're okay to do this. And having these webinars that come on and tell people that this is okay, I think is just incredible. And we're already helping people on their journey, and that's the whole point.
Yeah.
And that's what I love seeing. And so when people get further involved in this, it just makes me so full of joy, because I'm like, okay, we're going places, we're doing something, we're making an impact. And that is the I think probably anybody's point who has survived it and wants to do it, who's called to do it. You're wanting to make that impact in your life, in this second chance that you have, whether it's, you've been diagnosed or you've survived the dissection itself. You're wanting to make an impact for the next person that's affected. And so I can't stress the importance of being involved in any capacity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's tons, like as you mentioned, there are tons of ways to get involved. So check out the episode show notes for those if you're listening and want to get involved. There'll be links down there for you. Something, we're getting close to the end of our time here. Something that you mentioned earlier is kind of feeling, I think, disregarded, or maybe not treated as urgently as you needed to be in the hospital or by doctors or medical professionals. There's a good number of medical professionals and residents and medical students that do listen to this podcast. What would you want for them to take away from this episode about your experience with the aortic dissection, living with a VUS, and that kind of like uncertainty area of, not really having this named condition, but having the significant medical history. Anything that you want them to take away from your experience and carry with them through their careers?
Yeah, I think that that I realize with an aortic dissection, there are so many different presentations. So I can understand how it can be missed in several cases. But to really think outside of the box, that Think Aorta campaign, I think is incredible. And I wish we could have more, something in the hospital that would tell providers to, if it's not a heart attack, rule out the aorta, check the aorta too. But to not disregard that acute pain or, even stomach pain, if it's severe or somebody's recurrently coming back, that second time they're coming back, I mean, could be the life or death moment if they're back again, and I know several people who have passed away because the CT scan wasn't done. So I know there's these rules and policies around imaging, and you don't just CT everybody, but I just can't stress enough about not disregarding a patient just because they're 12, 20, 35, with whatever pain it is that they're having, and really listen to those symptoms. Like I said before, I said it's in my chest, it's in my back, it's in my stomach, and I was clearly telling them, but nobody caught it. So to really keep your eyes and ears peeled for the zebra, the one that's the rare one, that you may, because these doctors and providers may never see a case of an aortic dissection. And it's not to be, overly precautious and try to CT every single, I know that would be hard to do. I mean, I can understand that would be incredibly difficult, but being a person who, not just from my dissection, but even since I was like 20, I started having severe issues with my joints and my spine, and I was constantly blown off. And so even when the dissection happened, I felt like, here we go again. Like my whole life, I was blown off and felt like I had to be the person that Googles. I know a lot of providers don't like that. If somebody says, well, I Googled this, generally speaking, I would say that person has probably been blown off a lot and feels like they need, like I did, feels like they need to go look up something themselves and then ask a provider, do you think I have this? Because nobody was catching all these things all these years. And so just to really, I guess, not get too complacent. I know that's difficult in any job, but to keep the compassion and keep your ears peeled for what they are really telling you, and never forget to ask about that family history, because most generally people are going to have some kind of family history. And, mine was de novo, so they wouldn't have had any of that. But if they would have asked me further questions about, the pain, or have I had any other hypermobility, if something else that would have been directly related to that, maybe it could have got the ball rolling faster, And as far as living with a variant of unknown significance, I think that one can still live with this gut feeling, but not let it totally take over your life. Like, I feel like it's there and I'm concerned about it, but some people kind of ruled out, again, the pathogenic nature of it. But since I know my low criteria symptoms and things that happen to me, I feel like it's still in the back of my brain. So if something severe pain hits me again, not to negate that, because just because they said you have a VUS, you don't really have this, or maybe you don't have it right now, or we don't know, or whatever it was that they told the patient to, still be vigilant, still learn about it. And, that can still be okay for you. I remember at a certain point, somebody said, well, you're trying to connect too many dots and you shouldn't do that. And I just thought to myself, like, but isn't that what I'm supposed to be doing if there's a question there? So I guess I would also say, just don't, you know, you know your body, or you're probably getting to know how your body reacts to things or symptoms, and not to let the other noise affect you, either mentally or physically, because I feel like I've been able to kind of tune that part out and be like, no, this is what I think. Even if I have to keep it to myself, I know if something happens, what I'm going to do, and as far as, your kids, if you have a variant of unknown significance, you'd have to talk that over with your partner. Or if you're single, just make the decision for yourself regarding your children. But it is very, really difficult to not know the answer, but it doesn't have to live at the forefront of your mind all the time. I mean, just even the dissection, I had to kind of learn that, okay, like I was really scared to do things, but it doesn't, and because I'm better emotionally, doesn't mean I've forgotten. I just can't, I don't feel like I need to live with it at the forefront of my mind. If something happens, then worry.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, you're here, live your life and try to make it the most joyous life that you can have. Enjoy all the small things and don't worry so much about the big things. I don't know.
I think that's a great ending message for people listening to this, and for people who've been through what you've been through. I think it's a really important message to hear. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. And if anybody wants to get in contact with you after this episode, is that okay for them to do that?
Yeah, so I have most of the time patients outside of those other organizations that I've done volunteer work with usually reach out via the Run email. So Runforaortichealth, you can find it on Facebook or Instagram, and the email is runforaortichealth@gmail.com.
Perfect.
And so people can reach out there and we can connect.
Thank you. That's so perfect. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Katie. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to this episode featuring Carmen David, sharing her experience with an aortic dissection and VUSs. If you're ready to meet others, get involved, or need support, there are links for you in the episode show notes, as well as information on research studies for people with VEDS, Marfan, and Loeys Dietz, including those with a VUS. If you like this show, be sure to share it on social media or give it a rating or review. You can also support the production of this podcast by joining my Patreon, making a one-time donation, or by buying merch. As always, my top-tier patrons are listed in the episode show notes. In the next episode, we'll talk with Carlos Morales about his daughter Caitlin, who died of an aortic dissection and was diagnosed with Loeys Dietz shortly after they started high school. See you soon.